The volume of the rock music was at such a high decibel that I was compelled to cover my ears in an attempt to shield them from the cacophony. The crowd around me was lost in a frenzied dance, bodies gyrating wildly. Olivia, too, was amidst them, her movements peculiar and out of character. Known typically for her reserved demeanor and disinterest in rock music, her presence at this party was puzzling, to say the least. I couldn't fathom what had convinced her to attend. I regretted my decision to accompany her. Anxiety and fear were my overwhelming companions. I contemplated calling my dad for an escape, but the noise level was prohibitively loud. My attempt to text him proved futile as well, with no cellular signal to be found. I felt ensnared, as if I were in a nightmarish chamber of distress. I signaled to Olivia, expressing my desire to leave the dance floor, but my words were lost in the auditory chaos. She was utterly transformed, her hair wildly tossed about, eyes rolling back in a spectral display. Her pupils seemed to vanish, leaving her eyes eerily white. I couldn't decipher her actions. Distancing myself from the tumult, I sought refuge in a quieter nook, only to discover it was the unofficial restroom of the partygoers. The stench was unbearable, a violent assault on my senses. My stomach revolted, and before I knew it, I had vomited. Mortified, I feared the judgment of onlookers. Yet, when I finally mustered the courage to turn around, I was met with a shocking indifference. The party continued unabated, with a couple passionately engaged in a kiss, oblivious to my plight. I felt utterly repulsed. Taking a few steps away from that unpleasant corner, I was surprised to see a tall and attractive man approaching me. He commented with a smirk, "Looks like someone had a bit too much to drink, huh?" I responded earnestly, "No, I haven't touched a drink. Everything about this party is just overwhelming and nauseating. It's as if I've ingested a whole swarm of worms and can feel them wriggling inside me." He burst into laughter before grasping my hand and guiding me away from the pandemonium. A wave of relief washed over me as we reached the street, freeing me from that nightmarish setting. Gratefully, I expressed my thanks, not even pausing to ask his name, and promptly dialed my dad's number. After a 30-minute wait, my father finally pulled up. As I stood there alone, a group of intimidating-looking boys strolled by, seemingly up to no good. Fear gripped me, my heart pounding in my chest as if attempting to escape. I tried to keep my gaze fixed ahead and ignore them, but then I overheard their shouts. "Run! He's here!" Confused, I scanned my surroundings, but the only person I saw was the kind man who had assisted me in leaving the party. He appeared to have lingered to ensure my safety. My dad's arrival interrupted my thoughts, and when I turned to express my gratitude to the man, he had vanished. The following day at school, Olivia's avoidance made it clear that she was upset. She had pieced together that I had left her at the party the night before. I mentally scolded myself. How could I have been so thoughtless to not inform her? But her feelings of betrayal weren't the only thing preoccupying my mind. Olivia appeared entirely transformed. Her attire was all black, adorned with imitation tattoos, and her eyelids were heavily lined with eyeliner, creating an intimidating appearance. This radical change was a far cry from her usual style, which typically mirrored that of mine and the rest of our friends. Unable to find an opportunity to speak with her, I left for home. Upon arriving, I pulled out my phone intending to call Olivia, but was halted by a text from her, instructing me to cover for her if anyone asked, claiming she had stayed at my place the previous night. Realization hit me. Olivia had not made it back home, and it was my fault. My heart sank in guilt. She must have spent the entire night at that dreadful party. I hastily replied, assuring her it was okay and inquiring if she was all right. She left my message unanswered, marking the final communication I would ever receive from Olivia. In the days that followed, she transformed into a completely different person, displaying hostility towards everyone, isolating herself, and even abandoning her cheerleading practices. Her life seemed to be spiraling downward quickly, and the most agonizing part was my inability to help. During this time, I found myself assisting my dad in our pizza shop, filling in for an ill employee. While out on a delivery, I happened to cross paths with Elijah, the kind man from the party. Seizing the opportunity, I expressed my gratitude for his help that night. He responded with a smile, sharing that he'd have been trying to find me ever since, though his efforts had been futile. Before parting ways, he suggested we hang out sometime, leading to an exchange of numbers. Suddenly, I was filled with a sense of excitement about this unexpected turn of events. That particular evening, as I was handling pizza orders over the phone, I received a call that was unsettling, to say the least. The call began with faint, indistinct noises. I greeted the caller with, "Pizza Migos, how may I assist you today?" Yet received no response. The obscure noise intensified, prompting me to repeat my greeting, only to be met with the caller hanging up. The phone rang once again, and upon answering, a chilling voice requested, "I'd like a large pepperoni pizza with a side of your blood." I tried to dismiss it as a tasteless prank call, convincing myself it was nothing to worry about. I cycled home, attempting to put the creepy call out of my mind. However, I soon noticed a car trailing slowly behind me. Believing I was obstructing its path, I moved to the side, but the car continued to shadow my every move. Anxiety and fear escalated as the realization dawned that I was being followed. Too scared to glance back, I attempted to quicken my pace, but the car matched my speed. The darkness of the night betrayed me, causing me to collide with an unseen object and tumble to the ground. With an injured leg and a bleeding shoulder, I lay there on the deserted road. To my shock, two figures emerged from the car, and one of them was Olivia. Desperation took over as I extended my hand towards her, pleading, "Olivia, help me." Yet, her response only heightened my terror. She approached and began to press down on my wound, exacerbating the bleeding, all the while wearing a sinister and manic grin. I couldn't discern the identity of the other individual as he stood too far back in the shadows. Overwhelmed by fear and pain, I found myself unable to scream or fend her off. Olivia then took a piece of cloth and began to extract blood from my shoulder, leaving me frozen in shock and disbelief. Subsequently, she abandoned me, injured and alone, in the middle of the street. The next thing I remember is regaining consciousness in a hospital bed. My father explained that I had required stitches for my shoulder wound and that I would be discharged in a few hours. He left the room to give me some space to rest, and that's when my phone buzzed. It was a call from Elijah. A hint of a smile crossed my face, but before I could greet him, he asked, "Are you alone right now?" I confirmed that I was, and instantly he ended the call and walked into my room, closing the door behind him. He inquired about my well-being, to which I responded that I was doing okay. However, what happened next left me paralyzed with fear. Elijah stepped forward, pressed against my injured shoulder, causing an excruciating pain that brought tears to my eyes. He silenced my cries of pain with his hand and chillingly whispered, "If you breathe a word about last night to anyone, I will make your life a living hell. Do you understand?" Then he left the room without sparing me another glance. My mind raced, trying to make sense of his actions and intentions. What connection did he have with the previous night's events, or with Olivia? Could it be that he was? No, it seemed impossible. He had appeared to be my protector at the party. Yet, how else could I interpret his threatening words? Disturbed and desperate for answers, I found myself unable to sleep once I was back home. I attempted to call Olivia multiple times, but she remained unreachable. Driven by desperation, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I waited until my father was asleep, then stealthily left the house. Unable to ride my bike due to my injuries, I opted to call a cab and directed the driver to take me to Olivia's house, asking him to wait for me upon arrival. Upon knocking on the door, Olivia's mother answered, her demeanor frosty. I asked her bluntly where Olivia was, to which she replied, believing that Olivia was at my place for a study session since we had an exam the following day. I was at a loss for words, finding myself unable to explain the situation. I had no choice but to retreat back to the taxi, disregarding the barrage of questions from her mother. The following day, overwhelmed by fear, I pleaded with my dad to let me accompany him to work. He firmly suggested that I should remain at home to recuperate. Thus, I found myself alone at home, enduring a day that was not only tedious but eventually turned nightmarish. As dusk fell, a strange noise at the window caught my attention. When I turned to look, my heart nearly stopped. Elijah was standing outside, brandishing a sinister smile. In a panic, I reached for my phone, intent on calling the police. That's when he shouted menacingly, "Drop the phone." If you don't, I'll shatter this window, come in there, and kill you. You better open the door for us. Us? My mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. Frantically, I checked the other windows, only to discover Olivia positioned behind one of them. I felt the chill run down my spine, paralyzed in my seat. I needed to think quickly, yet I was terrified at the prospect of them breaking in and causing me harm. What did they want from me? When I looked back to where Elijah had been, he was gone. Seconds later, the sound of violent banging on the door echoed through the house. The door seemed like it might give way at any moment, prompting me to shout, okay, I'll open it. Regrettably, I decided to open the door, a choice I would quickly come to lament. As I did, Elijah and Olivia stepped inside, promptly shutting the door behind them. Olivia began to strategically place candles throughout the room, extinguishing all other sources of light. Elijah, standing ominously beside me, assured me that everything would be all right. I was completely bewildered, questioning their motives and why they had chosen me as their target. Within minutes, they had me seated in a chair at the room's center. Elijah donned a lengthy cloak, obscuring his face with a hood. My heart ached for my father's presence, wishing he would return from work and rescue me from this nightmare. Olivia commenced chanting unintelligibly, circling me as if reciting a prayer, though it bore no resemblance to any prayer I had ever encountered in church. It was utterly terrifying, a sentiment amplified by the sudden, chilling silence that enveloped the room. My heart sank as I witnessed Olivia approach, brandishing a sharp object. Overcome by fear, I screamed at the top of my lungs, desperately hoping a neighbor would hear my cries for help. Attempting to escape, I rose from the chair, but the pervasive darkness left me disoriented. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard the front door burst open and light flooded the room. To my utter disbelief, it was my father, accompanied by the police. They quickly apprehended Elijah and Olivia, while my father rushed to my side, his concern evident. I realized then that my shoulder was bleeding, likely a result of the adrenaline that had momentarily masked the pain. He swiftly ushered me to the hospital, and en route, I couldn't help but ask him, "How did you know something was wrong?" He explained that it was actually Olivia's mother who had contacted him, worried because Olivia hadn't been home for 4 days. She also recounted my peculiar visit from the previous night. So I decided we should involve the police and asked her to meet us at the house. He continued, "Upon our arrival, my screams filled the air as we noticed the house plunged into darkness. Later on, I discovered that Olivia had gotten entangled with a group of devil worshippers. To be initiated into their fold, she needed to collect 7 cups of blood. Apparently, the blood she had taken from me wasn't sufficient, prompting her return for more, which explained the sharp object she had in her possession. Elijah, on the other hand, was utterly deranged. He had a knack for convincing people that he could bestow upon them supernatural powers, provided they completed his ritual. I must admit, the fear I felt that day still lingers in my memory. As for Olivia, her fate and the repercussions of her actions on the other 6 individuals she attacked remain unknown to me. All I can confirm is that, thankfully, she didn't take anyone's life, though she did inflict harm on many. So, did you find my story gripping? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content.